this. I love having case studies that involve collaboration because it's one of the key questions that drives a lot of the discussions that I've found over the years and a lot of the roundtables is, as I said at the top of the show, not what you do, but how you do it, how you work across different departments, especially at large pharma companies. And that's what we're going to talk about here, is especially the ways in which a more centralized group at argenX works with its field marketing to crack particularly tough HCP nuts, especially institutional nuts. And I'm going to ask Joy and Octavia to introduce themselves, but in doing so, please let's distinguish among the roles that you have and what you do and how what you do impacts each other. Go ahead, Octavia.
Awesome. Hi, everybody.
Joy. That's
Chen.
Joy.
Joy Chen. I'm the Associate Director for Digital HCP Experience for the general myasthenia gravis indication business at argenX. And I would call argenX the fun size because we're in hyper growth mode right now and really excited to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Octavia Jones. I'm a territory business manager in Phoenix, Arizona, which means I'm in field sales. But in addition to that, I also work with the digital marketing team as the field digital champion in the West to help collaborate on some of these initiatives. And I would be remiss if I didn't say all of the opinions going forward are mine and not the opinions of argenX.
We're just going to superimpose.
Sorry, Katie.
We're just going to superimpose,
Detail.
Legal caveats. Let's define the problem. What are the main challenges in marketing into an HCP right now, and particularly institution?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So before the pandemic, in an institution, of course, they had barriers to entry. You just had trouble getting on site. They have busy schedules. They also have gatekeepers. And then the pandemic happened, and a quick shift to virtual engagements, which means everything opened up for having more digital platforms. All of our interactions were on Zoom, and we really drove a lot of traffic to the website. It also changed the way we would communicate. It had to be more precise. You only had this finite amount of time, right? Then the pandemic is over, and some of those themes continued. So now institutions are like, well, we kind of like this. We kind of like having this digital platform. So now we have a hybrid of doing a little bit of both. The challenge is, how do you still have impactful conversations when now they're like, well, wait a minute, we don't even have to have you in here now. Even though the doors are open, let's just stick with these digital platforms. So what we do is we want to make sure that we are constantly seen as a trusted, value-added team approach. No one individual is interacting, and it's not sales and marketing or med affairs. It's all of us as a team approach to add value, because that mind shift happened where they're like, well, we can just do everything remotely and not interact with you that way.
So let's move from the general to the specific, though, because every HCP is different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that came through as we were talking and prepping for this, is how customized your approach can be. So can you both talk about the distinctions and maybe out of example, how one is very different from another, and you really have to tool your strategy for each one?
Yeah, I guess I can go first, and just piggybacking on what Octavia was saying is this team approach, just to close out the previous question. So we set up field insight councils. So these are one rep per region where from a home office perspective, as we're creating content, as we're creating strategies, we get our source of insight directly from the field to complement our market research, to complement our ATUs. And the other, as Octavia has mentioned, our field digital champions are essentially rotational programs that goes into a double click, and they are truly integrated into the marketing team, my team, HCP experience to give us feedback on everything that we do. And to answer your question, how do we customize a lot of our strategies? So from a marketing perspective, different institutions have different needs, but on top of that, they're also at varying stages of the engagement funnel. So we would customize it first on that layer. Second layer is their specialty. So neurologists have different needs than neuromuscular specialists, than MPPAs, et cetera. So we customize based on their specialty as well. And then third layer is geographical. So each region are also slightly different. So we would pull insights and customize our content and strategy slightly different.
But some are tougher than others, right?
Yes.
I mean, there are some that simply are harder nuts
Yes.
to crack than others. And what is the distinction between those? What makes one of your targets especially tough? Because
Right.
we're going to be talking about one of those.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to piggyback on what Joy had mentioned, if you've seen one institution, you've only seen one institution. They are all absolutely unique. So thinking of this one specific institution that's in Arizona, they do have 2 other states where they also have institutions. They are notorious for being a no-see institution. You cannot go in what I call the front door. They're never going to just call you and invite you to come in for an appointment. Then there's the side door. Well, maybe you can run into them at a conference, at a national association meeting. It's the third door that I think has made us be able to crack that nut of this specific institution. And that third door might be, well, maybe that physician you're trying to see has some other activity he does in the institution. In this particular case, one of the doctors is also in charge of advancing technology interactions for this HCP. So who else then at this institution would have a shared goal? How can we meet with them on a shared goal to advance his need for advancing technology connections? So you find that person at the institution, which we did. Or another third door at this specific institution was, well, they have their own conferences that they put on outside of the national conferences. So yes, we have a booth at these conferences and that adds value, but is there a third door at that conference? Well, yes, there's someone that organizes these conferences. And there's one person in Arizona, and she's in charge of their continuing education. They don't have that person in the other 2 states. Our shared goal is she wants to add value to these conferences. So what if instead of just having a booth, we have a product theater? Now we bring in a KOL to talk about the science. Yes, we'll talk about our product, but we're going to talk about the science. Now that's another touch point that she can drive. Now she's trying to convince the physicians, hey, here's added value for our attendees, also added value for your residents and fellows. So there's now an inside man that has a shared goal with us. The way that this then connects to bringing qualitative insights back to marketing is now we can talk about, well, how can we communicate this new shared goal product theater or these new technology connections? Well, Joy's team has worked with us to build out like a digital virtual booth that we can do with this particular clinic at these events. And what does that look like and how can we evolve it? Or just the qualitative information of, hey, this doctor does other things at this institution outside of just being a clinician. How can you use then that information to build out more stories? And so that was a way to break in.
Let's back up and get into that headquarter data piece, especially the quantitative piece. The ways in which, from your perspective, what data are you using to identify and distinguish among these markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned about large institutions that we're hearing from the field that are very difficult, hard to access, right? But we cannot reach them all in a pilot program, so we have to do a level of prioritization. And we essentially have opportunity scores, and those are basically looking at 3 aspects. So it's HCP penetration, field penetration, and patient penetration. What those 3 aspects mean is out of the total HCPs, how many are enrolling VYVGUARD, which is the brand product. And then field penetration is out of all the HCPs, how many are engaging with the field and how many are truly having absolutely no say. And then for patient penetration, that is out of the total patient population that are diagnosed with general myasthenia gravis at these institutions, how many of them are on VYVGUARD therapy. So with those 3 levers, we set up thresholds about 25 to 30% and identified roughly 4 HCOs per region So for us to do that pilot targeting.
So I can see this. I can see the spreadsheet and the graphs in front of me as you describe them. But one of your roles, Octavia, is to complement this with the qualitative data, which I think you started talking about already. But let's talk about the ways in which the qualitative complements the quantitative, where you pick up and the things that you're able to tell Joy that her spreadsheet's not telling her.
Yep. Yeah, well, first of all, it's not just me telling her, we have a team approach, which really is the underlying theme that I think has helped us create value in some of these institutions. So before the launch, our thought leader liaisons or med affairs, they will be able to interact with healthcare professionals to validate some of this information that's already coming out of the quantitative data. I call it the go and see strategy. So is this content resonating? How do these HCPs view the product positioning in the marketplace, and so forth? And then after launch, we really try to pull out some behavioral qualitative aspects, and it first starts with having a deep understanding of how this specific institution works. For example, this specific institution has a physician-led, team-based approach to their care. In fact, if you go on their website, the physicians are listed as consultant physicians, right? They're not just the attending. So now you've got like a change of decision-making authority. It's not one doctor saying, yep, this is what we're gonna do. It's a team approach. So this qualitative information changes who we're targeting. Are they really influencers? Are they part of the decision-making group? And then are they conservative or are they innovative? This particular institution is known around the world for diagnosing complex, rare diseases. So their qualitative aspects are they want to create new avenues of hope for their patients. So they're going to be more apt to be early adopters, and they're research heavy. The contrast is another institution across town. They're not as closed loop. They're more population health driven. So they want content that's how can we partner to find resources, because they go out into the community and try to connect with other clinics. It's a vast difference. So this one specific institution, research heavy, they're a team approach, and a change in decision-making authority, so that changes what marketing does. The other one, more population health, they're connecting with community clinics.
So let's tie this back and see how does this activate into a strategy? Because I know in talking to you guys, you've got an interesting array of communications means. In fact, I was also surprised by what a role programmatic banner ads play in all of this as well. Everything from email to influencer marketing to programmatic ad banners. Let's talk about how this activates in a strategy, and especially how it activates the strategy in very different institutions.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can speak to that. It comes down to the where, when, what. In speaking with our field digital champions and cross-functional teams, we identified some low-hanging fruits, if you will, right? There are regional events happening at all times close to these institutions. There are department meetings happening at these institutions. So knowing those time points and knowing when those sponsored events are, we really increase the frequency of our programmatic targeting during those times. So that is the when. The where, which is the programmatic banners, the home office emails, the Viva approved emails, is to ensure that we have all of these tools ready for our field team as well as home office deployment. And then the what. So knowing these are institutions that previously would not see a lot of our field representatives and not be open to a lot of those in-person customer engagements, we've created KOL featured videos, and we have patient testimonials to really tell the story to these institutions, rather than just going with the MOA, the science, so really appealing to the emotions side of it. So that's how we activated it, but Octavia.
I was just going to piggyback on that because, yeah, that worked out so well. We were able to give information back to marketing on how these physicians wanted to interact. So I'm thinking of the speaker bureau changes that happened and the way we changed the types of programs we were offering. And one of them is just this one-on-one now meeting that a doctor can have with another KOL virtually. And it's not an hour-long presentation. It's like 20 minutes or so. So this came out of having this continuous feedback loop between sales and marketing. So we can pivot.
Two-way feedback loop.
Well, I want to get to the feedback loop in a second. And boy, the whole discussion about how you programmatically target the right people in the right space here, that's got to be a whole other discussion. But I do want to ask one thing about influencers, because one of the things we talked about earlier that came up is that the influencer universe has actually changed of late, especially in recent years after the pandemic. Would you speak to the role that influencers are playing now in your marketing plan and what changes you've seen?
Yeah, and I hesitate to only call them influencers because they have such a strong impact on decision making, especially at this one specific institution. Again, every institution is different. Some institutions have, parent companies that have a lot of corporate bureaucracy control, but this specific institution doesn't have all of those layers. So pharmacy, big decision maker. In fact, when I finally was able to connect with the lead KOL, they were going to come to a dinner program, which is against their policy in the first place. It's like, I absolutely need our director of pharmacy to be there. So they are part of the decision because they have a care team. The nurses drive a lot of the treatment plan decision making. So I think there's an opportunity here because of that theme change since the pandemic especially to reach these non-prescribers, reach them in a way not thinking that they're just influencers, but they are part of that decision-making authority.
So let's bounce back to the feedback loop. How do you optimize on the fly here? How much optimization can you do where in this process?
That's a great question, and I think that's the next phase is automation, right? I forgot to mention at the beginning of this chat is the three S's is simple, scrappy, and synchronized of how we're approaching this institutional targeting. So we are right now in phase 1, which a lot of it still stays in Excel spreadsheet, believe it or not. So we will, in addition to the prioritized institution target list, and that will further be validated by the field team and let us know, okay, this data makes sense, this institution actually should not be on the list. We're also sourcing from the field, from our TBMs, from our TLLs, in these conversations, which definitely can have a huge impact, the list of HCPs and extended care team ancillary staff that we could add on to further target from a programmatic media perspective. So I would say we are agile in a way, but there's certainly room for improvement and automate this process.
And downstream, Octavia, are you sort of getting feedback from people in the field about how they're responding to the marketing that they're receiving from Joy's side? And is that helping you then go back to Joy and inform her strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. We do get feedback from the field, from the institutions, from the HCPs, from the medical assistants, from the nurses, from pharmacy, from revenue cycle managers, but we do have to dig for it. They're not just forthcoming saying, hey, we want to tell you all about how we think about it. So you have to be naturally curious. You have to have a deep understanding of the value proposition that your company brings, that your team brings, that each person on your team brings, that the resources bring. You have to have a deep understanding of your internal value and then a deep understanding of that institution to try to match up where those opportunities are. But to also piggyback on how do we optimize on the fly, we had a radical change in how we organize recently. So we no longer organize around functional roles. We have communities. So we are both the sales and the digital marketing team are on an HCP experience community. And then we have a different community around patient experience. So we're organizing around outcomes, not around functional roles. In this community, we also have legal, compliance, IT. So the way we can do it on the fly is we bring in all of our internal stakeholders, earlier on. If you're thinking of maybe a design thinking framework, instead of going from empathize to define to ideate to prototype and then test and then bring in legal and all those people, they're at the very beginning. So if we need to make a change immediately, they're already part of learning about this feedback we're getting from the field.
That's going to lead me to my wrap question. But if you guys have questions, we're going to kick to you in a second. This program is, as you say, relatively young. So just in the last year, what have you guys learned, and what are the key course corrections that you've made?
Yeah, so some key learnings, it's really about test and learn, right? So initially we had a hypothesis that so I mentioned KOL content being a key content strategy. We thought, so if this KOL may have the most influence in their states or in their region, so we would dial up the targeting of this particular KOL. And we have a control and test group, and after looking at the data, we quickly realized proximity does not mean influence. So that gave us more questions to test, okay, maybe it is where these HCPs went to school is what we want to prioritize the way that we target them. Maybe it is the conferences where they had touch points. So based on that learning, we're able to create more hypotheses and to further test on. And another thing that we learned is we set up, so working with Spring and Bond, our media agency, we look at testing what is the right frequency, speaking of programmatic banners, and content fatigue, right? What is the right frequency? And the learning from that is somewhere in the middle in terms of how frequently we want to have daily impressions of these HCPs. Octavia?
Yeah, I would also just underscore, like, if you walked away with nothing else, it's that there's this team approach that really is making it all move quickly. And then we even had a little case study that a small group of people did with institutions at our company say, well, is this what the institutions want? Do they want a team approach? And they do. Because they do see the value in the different roles. They see the value in what Med Affairs brings. They see the value in what our thought leader liaisons. But we need to coordinate so we're not all just bombarding this institution. We have a targeted deployment of the value that each person brings. So again, it goes back to you need to have a deep understanding of what that value is, a deep understanding of what the clinic does. But the underlying theme is having that team approach.
Guys, thanks so much. But we have time for some questions.
Oh, you make it so easy on me. Hi, Agatha Shreko from Good Apple. So we're currently trying to implement this closed feedback loop with some of our clients because as a media agency, obviously we got a ton of NPI level data from the media placements that we're running in terms of engagement, which is a ton of data going back to Jennifer's point from yesterday. And one of our goals with our clients is to provide that data and the insights from those engagements to the sales force. But we're getting a ton of resistance because the sales reps are obviously busy in their day-to-day lives and in their jobs. So my question is, have you guys experienced this kind of friction in terms of creating this closed feedback loop with all the different stakeholders that may have information or may benefit from the information?
That's a great question. So I guess my answer would be baby steps. So we start off with, so it's a two-way feedback loop, but first you want to show the value that you're offering to the field. So what we're currently doing is just sharing a lot of our digital engagement insight with our field team, and that is the first step is actually finding where they would go for these pre-call planning and these insight. Some could go to Viva CRM, some could go to Athena or other platforms. So making it easy for them to access, and then second, making it really easy for them to comprehend. So we're trying to serve up what are, from a search and content consumption perspective, at an MPI level, what would most resonate with the HCP. So that is the first step, baby step. to provide insight to the field team. And then the next, which we have piloted, MBA, I said the MBA word, is more in Viva CRM, of course, push alerts to the field where they can accept or reject the suggestion. So we're going to revamp that as a 2.0 and be able to have more adoption, hopefully, after this first baby step is proving the value and then providing more push alert suggestions.
I think that's well said. I like how you said make it easy for us to use, because absolutely, if I have 4 different software platforms, I got to go to this person's spreadsheet and got to go to Viva for this and something else, or I don't know where to look. So they are making it easy for us to digest it, and I welcome that data. There's data that we get now I never had before. I could never see before what the digital engagement looked like for any of my HCPs. I had no idea they spent time on the dosing page, for example. I do want to see that because then it changes my interactions. But as Joy said, it's got to be in a digestible way and almost telling me, okay, you're going to use this for this reason, so I know where to look and how to use it.
We're about to go into roundtables anyway, so you can engage Joy and Octavia in the roundtables. Ladies, thank you so much. That was great.